Welcome everyone to the Big Iron Livestock Market Wrap Up. It's Monday afternoon, and I've got Daryl Holiday with Country Futures out of Frankfort, Kansas. And Daryl, crazy day in the markets. Going to be interesting to see what happens tomorrow. And I just a few takeaways that I kind of put in front of us to discuss today. Cattle on feed report out last Friday, and no major surprises other than some of the placements in some of these states. We're 1% below last year on inventory, placements down 3%. And some of the upper Midwest states like Minnesota, South Dakota, Nebraska were up on placements considerably, 5 to 15%, yet Texas down 23%. And probably a lot of that having to do with the calves that they're trying to buy coming in from Mexico that haven't moved.
Yeah, I
What's
think
your
yeah,
thoughts, Daryl?
yeah, I think there's a couple factors there. Number one, that you mentioned one of them that they have they've lost that Mexican feeder cattle supply. Now they've been calves. Very few cattle come into Mexico between 7 and 900. They tend to be calves, but you're right. They're hard wean cattle. They'll end up at the feed yards and that place. Now remember we haven't had those since November. Now that's going to change. Now we are going to see those move in. So that's one. And then the second one is this the disparity in cash prices between the North and the South just continues to be awfully wide, cheaper corn on addition to that. So that's why I think one of the other reasons you're seeing placements up in the North, lower in the South as we get into
Yeah,
those tighter numbers.
right. Makes sense. Yeah, I know. I looked at some of the values in South Dakota and Nebraska this week, even compared to Kansas. Prices were out of this world, hitting new record highs again.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just give you a little visual here. In Nebraska, primarily, there was some 430, 432 priced on some five weights, and man, some of the four weight calves were up in the $5 low $5 range. So just incredible numbers again, and it'll be interesting as we've got a market. The next few weeks, we've got calves coming in that will get marketed. I've been accepting calls all day saying, "What do you think? What's going to happen tomorrow?" Um, you know, also information out on the cow inventory down another percent from last year.
Yep.
So overall, some of the readings that I got and feedback were, well, this goes out to a group, a very random group, and do 65% of them answer the questionnaires, and how accurate is that information? But it appears we're on a whole not replacing these heifer calves into the herd as of this last summer, and a lot of with great markets this year, like we've talked about, a lot of these guys just dumped the heifers. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this inventory.
Well, what we did is we culled well, our culling rate was still pretty heavy. I mean, once again, we did cut back on cow slaughter, but the culling rate, the rate that you began the year with, was still pretty high. And at the same time, here's what we're doing. It looks to me like if these numbers are right, which I want to tell you this, all the numbers that come out of USDA in the last 9 months, I have worries about, but that's a mute point. How you can try to make these make sense is what we're just retaining the heifers to hold the cow herd somewhat steady. You know what I'm saying? Where it's down a little bit,
Yeah.
but we're certainly not building the herd. Do I think that maybe some of it started in the last part of the year to see we're seeing some of that? Yes, I do. But boy, that's once we've said many times, that's 27. That's 2027 beef, not 2026 beef. Certainly not 2025 beef. And so we're going to
Yeah.
see. I think the inventories are still a bit slow, and I think that all the reasons you cited are the reason we haven't seen that as rallies or haven't seen the increase in those inventories. We off the rallies in the cattle have just been met with here, take my cattle because the beef demand's so good.
Yeah, right. I did notice I didn't pull it up today, but early last week I did see the NOAA forecast, 30 to 90 days, went from below normal to just normal. across the heart of Nebraska, Kansas, western Kansas. But you look at the drought monitor, and it doesn't look like there's a lot of room to retain cattle. And we got a lot of ranchers in the heart of Nebraska sandhills all the way to the Panhandle. Eastern Wyoming looks tough, and a lot of western half of Kansas is really fighting a drought yet.
Yes. Yeah, we have. We've had some reprieve in it this year, and you really wouldn't expect the better rains to come until you get into the spring and into the summer. But if those fail to come, it'll even get worse. I think what you're
Right.
really pointing to is there's no guarantee. They don't feel like, man, we're so flush with moisture, we're going to start retaining a lot of heifers. I think that's very obvious. We're not seeing that. I think we're seeing it.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about that, and it isn't just. I think the forage supplies are good enough. The hay supplies, the hay price, a
Yes.
favor that we'll do some retaining. But as we all found out 3 years ago, those hay supplies can go to not much in a hurry if the wrong weather hits.
Sure. Right. Right. Last thing I just want to comment on and get your feedback. And as you told me before we started today, we placed tariffs of 25% on imported goods from Mexico and Canada. Now, that has been recently pulled today for at least 30 days. Uh, how is the market reacting to that? And are cattle going to be exempt from those types of tariffs or not?
Okay, first of all, no, they will not be. So they will not be exempt at all. And matter of fact, Canada is still on. Mexico has been paused for 30 days. Canada is meeting with, just matter of fact, right now, having discussions with President Trump whether something new will develop there. But the reason they were paused for 30 days in Mexico is the president of Mexico agreed to send 10,000 troops to the border. Remember, this is way more of a border war with Mexico than it is a trade war. You
Yeah.
could argue the same thing is probably true with Canada, maybe a little bit more of a trade mix. And in China is a whole other story. That's pretty what China's a border war with the fentanyl issue and also trade war. So
Yeah.
yes, the cattle will not be exempt. And what the reason the cattle market actually rallied off the news that it was paused and then fell apart on the future side is because of the realization that these cattle in Mexico that have been held up there for a long time because of the screwworm issue. This new protocol is going to get them to going. Now, there are still a lot of issues with that protocol. It's very expensive, uh, and I think that will slow them down to some extent. But they do need to move the cattle. And I will tell you, we were told this morning, even with the tariffs on, if there were to be tariffs, but they, as we said, were their paused, they still might move the cattle because you get cattle backed up like that, they want their money, and they'll just
Right.
have to lower. They'll probably lower the
Lower
price to get it
price.
moved. Yeah, that's what they'll do.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. With that said, and I'm getting calls all day long here today with our feeder calf sale tomorrow, and do we let them roll and just price them, or is this a bad time to be pricing on a slide down? Yet we're just sliding off all-time highs. So my
Right.
conversation with these guys is, hey, remember where we've been in the last week. We've been at all-time highs, and we might slide off a little here, but listen, this can be the best prices you've ever had. I don't know if it's worth rolling them to our next sale in 2 weeks. Do you
That
agree
would
with
be
that, or?
that's exactly my opinion. I think making changing your mind on when you got something up for auction is probably not a good idea. I don't think. Matter of fact, they might do. I think the other thing is the cattle that have been hurt the most, where we've seen the feeders back off more, is that 800-pound cattle, and that's really because of the corporate demand. Corporate demand has slid because there's no hedge in there, and so you lose that corporate demand, and some of that demand's gone. In other words, it's back to the smaller feeders, the regionals, and types of things on the feeder cattle side. So it'll catch again. I don't think in any way, as long as the demand holds up. Yeah, February is a tougher month, no question about that. It's hard to believe that you've set the cash high in the Fed cattle market in January, but we have done it before. In other words, we'll be back in April, we'll be back in June. I personally believe we will. I don't think we've done
Yeah.
anything that's really going to change this thing. Um, I, if Canada stays closed or still has the tariffs, that would change. There's a lot of fed cattle and feeder cattle that come out of Canada, and we
Right.
won't see those. My gut tells me they'll work out something just because they need it. It need everybody kind of wants it to be done, but you got he has a mission for what he wants to get done with the borders, and I understand that. And
Yeah.
I'm more concerned longer term with China than I am anything else. I think Mexico and Canada have a good chance of working their self out. I do think there's other trade issues with Mexico and Canada that might have to be worked out, but at least we would stop the tariffs. And so anyway, I think that
Yeah.
I still think the demand side is really the strength of the market, and we certainly don't have overwhelming inventories. We've just got awful high, awful fast. Sometimes you get a little bit air sick being this high, this fast, and I think that's what the markets. I think that's how you
Yeah.
describe the markets right now.
Right. Yeah. Good way to put it. We're just seeing a little pause in the markets, and where we go, we don't know. But obviously, with the fundamentals we have, this thing looks
Mm-hmm.
good for a while here anyway. And gosh forbid anything crazy that happens in the world. So,
That's right. That's
well,
right.
good. Well, thank you, Daryl. Again, I always appreciate your input and feedback on the markets each week. We'll plan to catch up with you next week. Until then, have a good one.
Thank you, Pat.
All right. Thank you.